I remember the first time I truly understood emptiness, not the emptiness of loss or loneliness, but the profound emptiness that holds infinite possibility. I was standing alone in my kwoon after hours of training, my body exhausted, my mind still racing. The room was silent except for my breathing, and in that silence, a question emerged. What happens when you strip away everything you've been taught? When you remove all the systems, all the structures, all the shoulds and musts that have shaped your entire existence? Most people never ask this question. They live their entire lives following paths others have carved out, never realizing they're walking in borrowed footsteps. They measure their success against standards they never chose. They fight battles that were never theirs to begin with. When I first arrived in America, I carried with me not just my physical belongings, but the weight of tradition, expectation, and rigid thinking. I was a vessel filled to the brim with techniques, philosophies, and approaches passed down through generations. I thought this fullness was my strength. I was wrong. You see, the martial arts world I entered was filled with styles, systems, classifications, minus boxes people desperately tried to fit themselves into. Wing Chun, karate, judo, taekwondo, each claiming superiority, each trapped within its own limitations, each forgetting the most fundamental truth about combat and about life. Reality has no form. The opponent standing before you doesn't care about your perfect form. Life doesn't reward you for following rules that limit your expression. The world doesn't stop and wait while you try to remember the correct response to its challenges. And yet, look around you. Look at how people live, minus trapped, rigid thinking, clinging to outdated beliefs, suffocating their true nature to conform to some idealized image of who they should be. They've become hardened, brittle, fixed in shape, minus the opposite of water. Water minus the softest substance in the world minus can penetrate the hardest rock, not through force, but through persistence, adaptability, and by following its true nature without resistance. When you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. Put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. But this isn't just some poetic metaphor. This is a fundamental principle that can transform every aspect of your existence, minus your relationships, your work, your personal growth, even the way you face your deepest fears and limitations. I want you to really feel this truth. The greatest obstacle to your growth isn't external, minus it's not your circumstances, your past, or other people. The greatest obstacle is your attachment to who you think you are supposed to be. Let me share something personal with you. When I was developing Jeet Kune Do, many traditionalists accused me of disrespect, of betraying centuries of martial arts wisdom. They couldn't understand that by questioning everything, I wasn't destroying tradition, minus I was honoring its deepest essence. The essence of martial arts isn't the preservation of form, it's the pursuit of truth. The truth is simple but devastating. There is no one path to mastery, minus in combat or in life. There is only your path, discovered through honest self-examination, relentless questioning, and the courage to express what is natural to you. When you punch, are you truly expressing yourself? Or are you performing someone else's idea of a perfect punch? When you speak, are those really your words or echoes of what you think others want to hear? When you dream, are they truly your dreams? Or reflections of what society has told you to desire? These questions may seem philosophical, but their implications are intensely practical. A fighter who blindly follows a system without understanding its principles will always be defeated by someone who has internalized those principles and adapted them to their unique attributes. A person who lives by external validation will always feel hollow compared to one who has found their authentic voice. Think of the bamboo in a violent storm. The rigid oak tries to stand unmoved and eventually breaks. The bamboo bends, adapts, flows with the wind, minus, and survives. Your mind must be like bamboo, not rigid, not fixed, but yielding, adaptable, responsive to life as it unfolds, not as you wish it would be. I developed 1-inch punch, not to demonstrate power, but to reveal a truth. Real strength doesn't come from physical distance, it comes from internal unity. When mind, body, and spirit align perfectly in a single moment, even an inch of physical movement can generate devastating impact. The same principle applies to every area of life. When your thoughts, words, and actions align perfectly with your authentic self, even small efforts create massive results. Now let me ask you something important. When was the last time you felt completely free? Not just physically unrestricted, but mentally and emotionally liberated? When did you last act without concern for judgment, speak without filtering your truth, or move without calculating the impression you were making? For most people, that freedom was lost somewhere in childhood, buried under layers of socialization, expectation, and the desperate need to belong. We trade our authenticity for acceptance, our natural expression for security. I see this tragedy played out every day, minus people with extraordinary potential living ordinary lives, because they've accepted the boundaries others have placed around them. They've forgotten that these boundaries exist only in the mind, and what exists in the mind can be transformed by the mind. The first prison, the need for approval. This is perhaps the most insidious of all limitations, because it disguises itself as virtue. We're taught from childhood that being liked and accepted is paramount, but this pursuit of universal approval creates a fragmented self minus a person who changes faces depending on the audience, who never fully commits to their truth for fear of rejection. Let me tell you about 3 invisible prisons that are likely keeping you from expressing your true potential. 3 mindsets that act like chains on your spirit. I didn't learn about these from any book or teacher. I discovered them through painful personal experience, through moments of failure, revealed see truths than any success could teach. I remember early in my Hollywood career being told to play stereotypical roles, to be the exotic Asian martial artist who makes strange sounds and never gets the girl. Taking those roles would have brought approval, opportunities, advancement. Refusing them meant conflict, criticism, closed doors. But true freedom began when I realized this profound truth. It's better to be rejected for who you are than accepted for who you are not. The second prison, the attachment to certainty. Human beings crave security, predictability, guaranteed outcomes. We want assurances before we act, certainties before we commit. But this attachment to knowing the end before we begin keeps us trapped in familiar territory, never venturing into the unknown where true growth occurs. When I left Hong Kong for America, I had no guarantees. When I began questioning traditional martial arts approaches, I had no certainty that what would emerge would be better. When I developed Jeet Kune Do, I stepped into uncharted territory with no map, no guide, only my own intuition and commitment to truth. The path to mastery is never clear. It reveals itself only to those willing to step forward into fog, to those who understand that certainty is the enemy of possibility. The martial artist who will only practice techniques they've already mastered remains forever limited. The person who will only take risks with guaranteed outcomes never discovers their true capacity. The third prison, the identification with past and future. Most people exist primarily in memory or anticipation, rarely in the present moment. They're either dwelling on past failures, reliving past successes, or projecting themselves into future scenarios, minus some feared, some desired, none real. But combat teaches an undeniable truth: there is only now. In a fight, if your mind is reliving your last move or planning 3 moves ahead, you've created a gap in your awareness, minus. In that gap lies defeat. Life operates by the same principle. Power, joy, creativity, and authentic expression exist only in the present moment. I trained my body to respond instantaneously, without the delay of thought, not just for fighting efficiency, but because this state of responsive presence is where we access our deepest capabilities. When you're fully present, fear dissolves, doubt disappears, and what remains is pure potential, unfiltered by mental limitation. These 3 prisons, minus the need for approval, the attachment to certainty, and identification with past and future, minus they don't exist in the physical world. You won't find them with a microscope or detect them with any instrument. They exist only in the mind, yet their impact on your life is more restrictive than any physical barrier could ever be. But here's the liberating truth: what exists in the mind can be transformed by the mind. These prisons have no walls except those you maintain through habit and belief. And habits can be broken, beliefs can be changed. How do you break free? It begins with awareness, minus the simple but difficult practice of noticing these patterns as they arise. When you feel that pull towards seeking approval, recognize it. When you hesitate because the outcome isn't guaranteed, acknowledge it. When you find yourself dwelling in past or future rather than engaging with the present, bring yourself back. Now let me share with you 4 specific practices that transform my own life, minus practices that aren't just philosophical concepts, but practical tools for breaking these invisible chains and becoming more like water. The first practice, empty your cup daily. Each morning, take 5 minutes of silence to let go of everything you think you know. Release your assumptions about your limitations, your expectations of how the day should unfold, your fixed ideas about who you are. Begin each day as an empty vessel, ready to receive new experiences without the filter of preconception. Most people start their day already full of yesterday's conclusions, full of plans and predictions, full of rigid identities. They leave no room for discovery, no space for growth. The cup that is already full cannot receive anything new, but the empty cup has infinite potential. The second practice, seek discomfort purposefully. Once a day, do something that takes you beyond your comfort zone, minus something small enough to be achievable, but significant enough to create tension. Speak up when you would normally remain silent. Remain silent when you would normally speak. Take a different route. Ask a question you're afraid to ask. Express a truth you've been hiding. The third practice, find your authentic rhythm. Most people live at a pace that isn't their own, minus either racing to keep up with external demands or procrastinating to avoid what they fear. Neither is natural. Neither expresses their true rhythm. Spend time discovering your natural cadence, minus in movement, in work, in conversation, in rest. When do you feel most aligned, most present, most energized? That is your authentic rhythm. Honor it. Express it. Don't apologize for it. I discovered early in my training that each person has a natural timing, a signature rhythm that, when honored, allows for maximum power with minimum effort. Fighting against your natural rhythm creates tension. Flowing with it creates power. The same is true in every area of life. The fourth practice, practice dying to the old self. Each night, review your day and identify one belief, one habit, one aspect of your identity that you're ready to release. Not because it's wrong, but because it no longer serves your growth. Visualize it dissolving, creating space for something new to emerge. This daily practice of small deaths prepares you for the larger transformations life will demand of you. The martial artist who cannot let go of a technique that once worked but no longer serves will eventually be defeated. The person who cannot release their outdated self-image will eventually be imprisoned by it. Remember, water has no permanent form. It doesn't cling to any particular shape. It doesn't insist on remaining as it was. It transforms as circumstances require, minus from liquid to solid to vapor, and back again, minus without resistance, without attachment. These 4 practices aren't separate from your life. They're meant to be integrated into it. They don't require special equipment or dedicated hours. They require only your awareness and your commitment to living more authentically, more freely, more powerfully. Now let me share something few people understand about human potential. We often think of growth as addition, minus gaining new skills, accumulating more knowledge, building greater strength. But the deepest transformation comes not from adding, but from removing, minus stripping away the artificial, the inauthentic, the unnecessary. Consider Michelangelo's approach to sculpture. When asked how he made his masterpiece David, he explained that he just deleted everything that wasn't David. The marble itself was already exquisite. His genius lay in revealing it. Your true self, powerful, creative, and limitless, is already present beneath layers of training, habitual behaviors, and the armor you've built to protect yourself from life's uncertainties. True growth isn't about changing into someone new. It's about uncovering who you've always been beneath these accumulated layers. This is why I eventually took the mirror out of my workout room. I realized I wasn't seeing myself in that reflection. Instead, I was seeing my perception of myself, my assessment of myself, and my comparison to an external standard. The mirror had become yet another prison, an attachment to form rather than spirit. The day I stopped training with mirrors was the day I started feeling my motions rather than seeing them, experiencing them from within rather than observing them from outside. And in that inside awareness, I discovered a fluidity and naturalness that no outside observation could have shown. Your journey to water-like adaptability will need the same shift, from outward validation to internal awareness, from outer appearance to inner authenticity, and from how things appear to how they actually are. Let me tell you about a morning that transformed my perspective forever. I was rehearsing a sophisticated sequence of motions that I had done thousands of times before, but today was different. As I moved, I became aware of a mild strain in my shoulder, which I had never noticed before. This strain was more than simply bodily. It highlighted a deeper pattern, my tendency to try too hard, forcing outcomes rather than allowing them to arise naturally. Something changed during that instant of consciousness. I didn't try to resolve the tension. Instead, I observed it objectively, and with little effort on my side. The tension began to dissipate. Movements that had previously needed effort become effortless. Techniques that had appeared complex became simple. What changed was not the movement, my connection to it. This is the central contradiction of personal transformation. The more you try to alter yourself, the more you support the perception that you aren't good enough as you are. Real transformation comes from recognizing and accepting who you are, rather than seeking to be different. Not by adding more layers, but by deleting the ones that conceal your core. The martial artist who focuses solely on learning new techniques rather than intuitively integrating them will always appear mechanical, lagging behind those who have made the craft their own. Anyone who acquires self-improvement strategies without first addressing their core relationship with themselves will always feel incomplete, pursuing the next fix, solution, or guru. Now, allow me to offer you with a 7-day challenge that will kickstart the process of improving your connection with yourself and life. This isn't about spectacular instant change. It's about initiating tiny alterations that over time result in deep transformation. Day 1, observe without passing judgment. Throughout the day, practice recognizing your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without categorizing them as good or bad, right or wrong. Observe how frequently you criticize yourself. Take note of times when you suppress your own feelings. Take notice when you seek approval. Don't try to change anything, just become aware. Day 2, question one belief. Identify one limiting assumption about yourself. I'm not creative, I'm bad with money, or I'm too old to start something new. Spend the day challenging it, nor resisting it, nor attempting to replace it with a positive affirmation, but rather exploring it thoroughly. Where did this belief stem from? What evidence have you gathered to support your claim? What if this belief was not true? Day 3, express yourself before editing. Today, whether you're writing, speaking, or creating, practice expressing your first natural answer before your internal editor takes control. This does not imply being nasty or careless. It just means allowing your true reaction to emerge before reshaping it to match expectations. Consider the difference between what you naturally want to convey and what you eventually do express. Day 4, depart from your center. Throughout the day, pay attention to your physical center, the spot immediately below your navel known as the hara in Japanese martial traditions, which is the seat of your fundamental strength. Take a second to connect with this center before beginning every action, conversation, or choice. Move from here, not from your extremities. Speak from here, not from your neck or head. Choose from here, rather than under external pressure. Day 5, make space between stimulus and response. Practice taking a quick pause before reacting to circumstances, particularly tough ones. In this tiny space, even half a second, you have the opportunity to pick a response, rather than being influenced by conditioning. This isn't about repressing your natural feelings, it's about giving you more options for how you express them. Day 6, embrace one fear. Identify anything you've been avoiding out of anxiety, such as a conversation, a creative activity, or a choice, and take deliberate steps toward it. Not recklessly, but with awareness. The goal is not the outcome, but the desire to confront your fears and feel the discomfort without being controlled by them. Day 7, Celebrate your genuine expression. Recognize and celebrate times when you expressed yourself truly, chose truth above comfort, and responded to reality directly rather than via the filter of conditioning. These moments, no matter how minor, are successes, because they showed your true self in action, not because they produced an external consequence. This 7-day challenge is not about perfectionism. There will be instances when you forget and slide back into old habits. That is not failure. It is part of the process. The martial artist who never loses equilibrium never learns how to regain it. The individual who never falters does not learn how to rise again. What matters is not flawless execution, but the repeated return to the practice of awareness, the dedication to authenticity, and the pursuit of your own truth rather than someone else's prescription for your life. Remember that water doesn't battle obstacles, it flows around them. It does not fight gravity, rather it surrenders to it, and in doing so finds its way. Similarly, your growth comes from aligning with your inner nature, removing the barriers to your natural manifestation, rather than forcing yourself to take on unnatural forms. Allow me to relate one final story. Years ago, a young student approached me after class, discouraged by his progress. "I've been training for years," he explained. "And I don't feel like I've perfected anything. Sometimes I believe I knew more when I initially started." I grinned, realizing that his statements mirrored my own journey. "I knew initially started," I informed him. "I knew the techniques. Now you're getting to know yourself. This feels like less since it's no longer something you have. Something you are." "The only meaningful criteria," I responded, "is if you express yourself more truthfully today than you did yesterday. Everything else is simply a comparison to artificial forms that have nothing to do with your individual experience. Your true expression," I told him, "feels like freedom. Not like achievement, validation, or security, but like liberation. When you exhibit your true nature, there is no difference between what you do and who you are. There is no gap between intention and action. Your inner experience and outside expression are inextricably linked. And you become like water, unified, responsive and powerful in your natural flow. This is the essence of what it is to be formless and shapeless as water. Not without structure, but without a set structure. Not without direction, but without a set direction. Power, but without coercive power. You do not need to construct your real self, rather, you must uncover it. It lurks beneath the techniques you've devised to obtain approval, beneath the armor you've made to protect yourself from grief, and beneath the identities you've created to understand your place in the world. When you remove everything that isn't genuinely you, all the shoulds and musts, all the constraints you've accepted without question, and all the sacrifices you've made to fit in, what remains is both less and more than you expected. Less stiff and more flowing, less certain and more alive. Less finished means more free. This is the paradox that few ever completely understand. True mastery is not about becoming something, but about unbecoming everything that isn't you. True strength is displayed by flowing with the currents of life while remaining true to yourself. True wisdom is discovered not in acquiring more knowledge, but in being humble enough to admit how little you actually know. Become water, my friend, not as an intellectual abstraction or a literary metaphor, but as a lived experience. Let go of who you believe you should be, and let your true self to emerge. Release your connection to specific outcomes and experience the power responding to what is. Empty your cup of preconceptions and see the world for what it is, not what you've been told. The trip I invite you to take is not simple. It takes bravery to challenge everything you've learned about who you are and what you're capable of. It requires honesty, the desire to view yourself clearly, free of ego distortions, conditioning filters. It calls for perseverance, the determination to return to the practice of mindfulness over and over again, even when it is uncomfortable, particularly when it is uncomfortable. However, this route also provides something few other roads can, the chance of true freedom. Not freedom from circumstances, as life will always provide problems beyond your control, but freedom within them, the ability to reply truly instead of reactively, the ability to exhibit your distinctive personality rather than conforming to external standards, the freedom to flow with life rather than resist it. This is what it means to be formless or shapeless, like water. This is what it means to genuinely express oneself. This is what it means to live as yourself rather than who you believe you should be. Empty your cup, consider your constraints, express yourself before you edit, move away from your center, make space between the stimulus and the response, embrace your fears, celebrate your authentic expression. These practices are not ends in themselves, but rather gateways to a way of being that goes beyond technique, system, and expresses your own truth in every instant. Remember, the cup is only helpful because it is empty. Your greatest power is not what you accumulate, but what you are willing to release. Your deepest wisdom is derived from what you are willing to discover rather than what you already know. Become water, my friend. Not only do you move, but you also think, feel, and live. Be flexible enough to adjust without losing your identity. Be crisp enough to capture reality without distortion. Be strong enough to carve new roads as necessary. Be water, and realize who you have always been beneath the forms you've been trained to keep. Be water, and flow past seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Be water, and you will find strength in yielding, power in adaptation, and freedom in nature. Be shapeless like water, my friend, and in that formlessness you will discover your actual power. Not the power to dominate life, but the power to flow with it, respond to it, and express yourself with clarity, honesty, and freedom.